Have you ever wondered why it's possible if you are outnumbered by a large margin, 10 to 1, you can still win in Hearts of Iron 4? Well, we'll start out with a quote from Sun Tzu, everybody's favorite. If you know yourself and your enemy, you can face 100 battles without fearing defeat. Or roughly like that. So today I'm going to go through three, or what I think are the three main reasons why that is. We'll start out with, I'll start out with telling you, and then I'll go into more details. In my opinion, the three main reasons why you can win in single-player Hearts of Iron 4, if you are vastly outnumbered, is what I would call the strategic doctrine difference of force concentration versus overwhelming force, which is kind of what what in single-player your opponent is going to be using. The second one is the lack of operational reserves on the side of your opponent. And the third one is the lack of coordination between allied nations on the opposing side. So let's begin with the first one. Force concentration against overwhelming force. What is the difference? Well, force concentration is historically a really, really old application or principle to be applied, where you say the defense is, a prepared defense is vastly stronger than everything being equal an offense. And that means you need to not be necessarily stronger than your enemy everywhere on the front line. You just need to be stronger there where it counts. So you concentrate your forces in one point, which allows you to overwhelm the defenses, even though you may be overall in a weaker position. And that allows opportunities, breakthroughs, and all kinds of other things. Whereas the sort of overwhelming force idea is going more along the lines of line everybody up on two sides and then let them clash into each other, and the stronger one wins. The single-player opponent is appearing to be subscribing to, and I'm not calling it an AI because it isn't one, but is subscribing to the second one. So what you'll find is that oftentimes your single-player opponents are going to equally distribute their forces more or less along the lines, trying to match the forces that you have on the defense on your side. And the same thing happens more or less if you draw a front line, right? So if I draw a front line here, my forces will distribute themselves relatively evenly along the front lines, depending on how defensible certain terrain is and how much opposition that they're facing. So that means that a single-player opponent actually needs a significant amount of superiority in force along the line in order to be able to break through. Now, that isn't to say that the opponent doesn't favor certain places. So, for example, I had a Soviet campaign where the German player, the German computer player, was definitely favoring certain positions, and that then allowed me to fortify and reinforce these positions and concentrate my defensive forces there. But generally, they are not using their advantage. So, just as an example, let's have a quick look at this front line here, right? So if we look at the concentration of British forces here in certain areas, we can see that if they were to leave one or maybe two divisions on the defense, they could concentrate sufficient divisions to break through my defenses without too much problems. That would be concentration of force, but they're not doing it. And because they're not doing it, you can do it to them in return, which means you can then create operational breaches, you can then create encirclements, and you can then defeat parts of large sections of their armed forces in detail by creating a localized superiority along the front lines. Whereas the AI is more or less, the computer player is more or less relying on an overwhelming force along the line to push you back and to gain the momentum. Number two, the lack of operational reserves. So for that, I'm going to have to elaborate a little bit. I've talked in the past about the power of prepared defenses and the power of entrenchment if you're on the defense. And entrenchment isn't just, I'll leave a link to the video, but entrenchment isn't just digging holes in the ground. It's a lot more including preparing fire solutions, including positioning your artillery, spotting, all kinds of things. So what is an operational reserve then? Well, you wouldn't usually align all your troops along a front line. You would usually have some troops in reserve who you could pull in from behind in case an enemy breaches, because otherwise you're facing a problem where you're effectively on the run and you can't fall back to a previously prepared defensive position. So an operational reserve could be a prepared defensive position in the back, which you can fall back to in order to stop the momentum that an enemy advance is making. Or it can be, and again, this is something that I've exploited in my Soviet in a Soviet playthrough a while back, is positioning troops that are not actively engaged in combat behind the lines that you can bring in to push back against an enemy that is threatening to break through your lines. And that is something that the computer player doesn't do. Now, in order for you to be able to do that, you're actually going to have some divisions left that you can use. But I find it in general quite useful to have a bunch of mobile divisions around, especially motorized or tank divisions that are faster than infantry, because you don't necessarily know ahead of time where they're going to break through, are quite good. And have them placed behind your lines if you're playing defense to push back against enemy breakthroughs. And that can be a really, really strong play that you can make, even if you are under strength compared to overall, but you can create these kind of localized counterattacks. And the third one, the lack of coordination between allies. So again, an example here, you will see that, for example, here you have multiple divisions from multiple countries occupying a front line. So here we've got 3 Australian divisions, we've got 3 Yugoslavian divisions, and we've got 1 Turkish divisions. And then here are 2 Czech divisions and 2 British divisions. But they will not coordinate their attack. Now, to be fair, this isn't something that you can necessarily do either with your with your own alliances, but you can sort of do it partially. So if they were to coordinate their attacks, they could break through my defenses, but they don't. So I am effectively not facing a 10-to-1 superiority, but I'm only facing maybe a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 superiority locally against a single member of the opposing faction, but because they're not all coordinating their attacks. You can do this if you see that, for example, one of your allies is attacking somewhere. You can join these attacks and you can coordinate that, whereas the computer player doesn't do that. So for me, these are the 3 main reasons why you can, even as a minor, even if vastly outnumbered, you can manage to defeat a superior force by defeating them in detail, by creating encirclements, by creating localized breakthroughs, and by concentrating your force most importantly. And if you're on the defense, to counter, even if you're facing a strategically overwhelming force, you can use entrenchment, you can use the operational reserves if you can manage to have them to counterattack these kind of things and to hold more effectively. So there you are. And if you have any additional ideas or opinions on that, I'd be loving to hear them in the comments. But that's it for me today. Thanks, everybody. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.